Yeah, kind of on that topic, there's the big issue of acid mine drainage, which not all mine drainage is acid, but what that means is often when mining occurs in the context of you're going down into a rock formation or a mountain and basically, breaking it apart, blowing it up so you can pull out the ores and then get raw metals out of it for various, important purposes. But all those rocks are previously stable and anaerobic. And now that it's been dug up, they'll have groundwater, surface water flow through it. And then all that water and oxygen hitting those rocks allows these chemical reactions to happen where you have things like sulfur oxidizing bacteria that are taking a lot of the times it's like the pyrite minerals, which are like iron sulfur based minerals, but they're taking that was stably bound in the rock. Now they're oxidizing it and turning it into like a dissolved iron, which in the process produces a ton of protons or hydronium ions. So now you have this liquid coming out that's full of iron and sulfate and all these other, whatever other heavy metals or trace metals were in that material. And now they're flowing out into this water that's going to go and end up in a stream or a lake or something. And it's this global contamination issue that happens when mining occurs. It's inevitable. Figuring out how to manage that's an important kind of environmental management goal. But bring it back to the rust concept. You have this kind of reduced soluble iron that's being created by bacteria from the rock. When that water comes out of the ground, it's completely clear. It looks like normal water, even though it's loaded with iron, because the reduced iron, the iron that has more electrons on it, is soluble. So it comes out clear, but all it has to do is hit the air and it immediately starts turning bright orange. And depending on the pH, if it's a low pH, then microbial iron oxidation is really important. The pH is higher, a lot of it just happens spontaneously or abiotically just because that reaction is energetically favored. So I know we're all into the biology here, but sometimes these profound transformations happen without it as well. So one thing about that is you can see clear water coming out of the ground, but if you get it on your pants are going to turn orange in a few minutes because then the iron is going to oxidize and it's rust occurring. And color changes, they're a pretty profound way to see the transformations happening in the environment. So obviously there's lots of chemical reactions that don't have obvious color changes, but some of them do. And so these are kind of some of the more what would we say, gross or intuitive ways to assess what's going on with soil and rocks is to look at the colors and see how they're changing. And so there's I think this ties into there's a lot of tools we can have to try to figure out what's going on in a landscape that we can use without having to go take samples and send them to an analytical lab. It's not foolproof. There's multiple reasons why something might turn orange. There's multiple reasons why a soil might turn black or change colors, but we can at least use it as kind of a beginning starting point of aha, I see this change here. Maybe that means that this mineral has accumulated or there's been a change in the, from being oxygenated to anaerobic. So these are, there's a lot of different things you can put in your toolkit for trying to figure out what's going on in the nature around you and observing color changes and smells and odors. These are some of the big ones.
Yep, the nose knows. Craig, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I think one way a lot of people can kind of understand that, we talked about biogeochemistry, right? That's principally the fields of chemistry, geology, and biology that kind of come together, right? And there's all those aspects. And kind of I think one way we can see in our soils is that if you've ever kind of been somewhere in the city or a development, if you've dug a foundation, you may see underneath the roots or the soil, this compaction layer. That usually is the case with a lot of disturbed soils. They're called technosoils at the technical aspect, not soils that go to a nightclub, but they technically impacted with kind of modification. But one of the things, if you go dig down there, you get down to the parent material and you'll see these thick clods, right? And these different bands of colors, right? And, even to certain clays, which will they'll have deposits of different minerals in there. And then based upon whether it was submerged, the microbes, other factors, you get these kind of different color iterations. But yeah, like that's one of the first ways, like understanding your soil is to approach it. Yeah, we can get at the microscope, we can get the DNA sequencer, but just going there and looking at it, understanding it, like doing a soil jar test, doing a infiltration test, a percolation test, which I'm sure Leighton has talked about. Because the reality too is you have to start somewhere on our human scale, right? Like you have to start with the geology, right? And then people look at different types of rock formations, whether you're in a sandy soil, clay, a loam, right? And there's different advantages for different types of crops. But then you have to descend down to the chemistry, which you can kind of see different factors. But the biology is something that we can really, and this is kind of a lot of the soil food concept, if you really understand and trying your best to build up the biology back through good organic matter, good processes, and doing things that are understood to be good, right? There's a lot of back and forth over anaerobes and avoiding them, but there are processes which Leighton has spoken to with, even fish manure or certain things, fermenting it and then aerobically stabilizing it and maintaining to monitor the temperature and pH, which are, factors in brewing good compost tea. We can replenish and recover it, right? I think at the end of the day is like we have to think about these things as biological interfaces. Like we I think more so like, maybe we'll think about it in the future where like it's like kind of like Neo plug into the brain thing, like that kind of thing. But in reality, like a shovel is a biological interface. Like the first stick that was used to push a furrow in a plow, a yoke that goes around an oxen to help pull that moldboard initially, right, is just much a piece of biotechnology, a biological interface as a pipette or a DNA sequencer. And then, that's the aspect. So I think to kind of people understand or getting into it is just don't be overwhelmed with how big it is. Just take it one step at a time and understand that the biology is an important component, but what you are able to interact with is using your senses, right? And the smell, the nose knows, right? If anyone's ever, left some produce out, some like brassicas soaking in water, you'll smell that hydrogen sulfide going to work. If you've left some manure sitting out or something, you smell the ammonia coming off it. And, and there's some ways where like we can allow this rotting to be good, right? Fermentation, right? What's the difference? Like, textbook like putrefaction is kind of the breakdown of proteins, but there are ways which we can steer this microbial decomposition, this good in a rotting in a good way, which can benefit us for improving the nutrition in our foods, but also making food for our plants and the soil and prepare the soil for those plants. So yeah, I think the aspect too is like to speak generally about these things. There's all this aspect, but in your journey, just kind of don't be afraid. It's one step at a time. And we have the internet, we have the Library of Alexandria in our hand, and then we have these communities. So kind of a deeper, kind of like, teleological kind of way.